anytime. So welcome, thanks for joining the call. I'm Jim. I'm a student at Code Institute, and I really love breaking things down and trying to present them in a simple way, especially when it comes to this subject, because I think a lot of people get confused with the terminology. We've got Git, and we've got Gitpod, and we've got GitHub and GitHub pages. So in order to try and kind of demystify that, I thought I'd take you through just a nicely structured way of explaining what each is. Okay, so if we dive straight in, let's look at some of the terminology here. So Git is extremely important. You're going to be using it throughout the course. If you've just entered user-centric or you're going into your milestone 1 project, this would be all quite new for you, and it takes a bit of time getting used to, but it is a lot simpler than it first seems. So your Git is your version control system, and that makes it easy to track your progress of your project building. All right, so you're going to be doing commits and commit messages, which will sort of populate a history of changes or additions to your files. Okay, so that is the actual version control. A repository, okay, you've obviously heard a lot on the term repo, which is just short for repository. It's like a storehouse that stores things. In this case, it's a file storage location. Okay, and then we use version control to affect the files in that location. Now, the repository needs to be stored somewhere or hosted somewhere. Okay, it's all very well having that is simply put like a folder full of your files, but we need to host it somewhere so it's accessible for not only yourself, but if you're collaborating with other people. And that is what GitHub is. You can see I've underlined all of these, and that is basically pointing out the word hub. I mean, think of that semantically. A hub is kind of a gathering place and so forth. All right, so GitHub is a free Git repository hosting service that you can host your repositories on. All right, that's quite simple. Okay, each project you build will have its own repository, and you will notice that each one will have a URL with this format. Okay, so first you've got github.com. Then you've got your username, that is the account name that you logged in with. And then each one has a project name, and we're going to be going into that shortly. All right, so we've got, the next one is Gitpod. And Gitpod is a cloud-based IDE. You do get local IDEs like Atom and Sublime and VS Code or Visual Studio Code. And those are usually working from your local machine. So your files are local on your machine. With Gitpod, we're working in a cloud-based environment. And this is what all of the course material is taught on, is taught through. So I would recommend using Gitpod through the duration of the course material. If you want to explore VS Code and others, you're welcome to. But when it comes to, back-end development later on in the course, there's quite a difference between working locally and working in Gitpod. And the course material, as I said, is taught in Gitpod, so I do highly recommend sticking to it for the course material. Okay, so Gitpod is essentially a workspace. It's like your desk of how you're going to organize your files, write your files, make changes to your files, and once you've made changes to those files, you're going to get them into your repository, which is stored or hosted on GitHub. Okay, then lastly, GitHub Pages is a deployment area. I'm trying to put it as simply as possible. It's a website hosting site. So you can basically host a website through GitHub Pages. And we will go through this to make it a little bit easier to understand. Okay, so let's get on to the first step here. The first thing we need to do is we need to set up a GitHub account. Many of you would have done this already. There are possibly people in this call that might have just started the user-centric front-end section. So we'll just run through that very briefly. So you'll head to github.com and you'll click the sign up button over there. Obviously, I'm already logged in, registered, so I'll do that in a second. You put a username you can choose. If it's chosen, it'll tell you that it's chosen. Try another one. This is a very straightforward process. You've all logged into something before or signed up to something before. So your email address, password, and create account. And then simply sign in. Okay. All right. That's very straightforward process. Okay, the way that the course material has been set up throughout the course has required a couple of handy extensions and files that are needed, especially later on. And as I said, we're going to be using Gitpod as the workspace or the IDE to write our code in. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to install the Gitpod extension. It's a browser extension. Now, this is available in Google Chrome and on Mozilla Firefox. So if we have a look at Google Chrome, that's the link. I've popped that in the slideshow, so you can copy that in later. And again, on Firefox, the browser extension is there that you can just add. Okay, before adding this, I just want to show you a repository. So this is the one for the Gitpod full template. I'll go through that in a second. But what I want to point out is this is the format that is on most repositories throughout GitHub. What we need is what the browser extension does is it adds the Gitpod button. So I'm just going to add that as an extension. Okay. Now if I go back in here and I press F5, you'll see that this changes slightly and there's a green Gitpod button. The purpose of this button is to open this repository in Gitpod, our workspace. Okay. We will go through that practically in a couple of minutes, and I'll show you the process. Okay, the next thing we want to do is initially we must install the, well, it's handy to install the Gitpod full template that Code Institute's put together for everyone. It's got some great extensions. As I said, it's got files and settings that will be needed later on. So use that every time that you create a new repository. Okay. The very first time that you use this, you want to go to this link. I have put it in the slideshow too. Okay, so it's over there. And you'll click the Use This Template button. Okay, what that is going to do is use this template to create a new repository. Okay, before I do that, I just want to show you the other way. So what you do is fill in the details. I'm not going to do it here because we're going to use another case scenario that you've already done this. Okay, so as I said, the very first time you've started your GitHub account, go to this Gitpod full template, click Use Template, and that will install the template. So that if I go back to, you know, if this is installed already for my account, if I click the little octocat in the top left over here, and I click New, it'll open up a very similar page, but it's a bit longer. And you'll see that it's not creating a new repository from that template. It's just a new repository. But it does have a little option here saying, would I like to use it, one of the templates? If I click that, because I've already used the template, there will be a drop-down box, and I can choose codeinstitute.org Gitpod full template. all right, which is the one that you've just seen. So the branches you can check, it's not necessary right at the beginning, but there's no harm to. And we're going to give it a name. So let's call this one Git Walk Through. I should try and spell that. I've got typo fingers, so do excuse me throughout the session. Okay, you'll notice that it's all lowercase and you want to use a dash between words. Okay, if you do type it just with a space, it will add those dashes. And we can put a nice description in here. So a test repo for the introduction call on Git. I'll just make that nice and short and sweet. Okay. So just to stop here and explain that when you do get to your projects, or if you're creating a project that has some meaning, I mean, if you're doing a test and it's no problem, you're going to delete it later, that's fine. But especially for your milestone projects, or if you're building a project for your CV, your GitHub CV, don't call the repository MS1. There are hundreds of repositories called MS1, as I'm sure you can imagine. So you want to name it what your project is about. So if it's Bob's Coffee Shop, call it Bob's Coffee Shop, okay? And then give it a description. And here we can give a description, which is the Milestone 1 project for the Code Institute's software development diploma, all right? Now, you'll see an option over here, it's public or private. Keep that public because we do want to deploy the page to GitHub Pages, or deploy the project to GitHub Pages, and you will need to ensure that that is made public. Okay, before I create the repository, I just want to show you those last, when you get to this page, you'll notice some options here, add a README, add a git ignore, choose a license. Don't worry about any of these. You'll notice that that disappears once you click the template. And the reason is all of these are included. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is create a repository. Okay, it'll take a couple of seconds just to generate that. And what you will notice is this is identical to the Gitpod full template that we saw earlier, except if you look very carefully, as I explained earlier, github.com, that's my username, and we've got the repository name. So this is mine. It's not a clone, or we're not using the Gitpod template. You don't want to click the Gitpod template, the Gitpod button on that template. You want to only open this from your own repository. Okay, that is very important. So at the moment, we've got a very, very basic repo. There's not much in here besides a README, and these files and folders will be hidden by default. So when we open that in Gitpod, and actually I'm going to do that now because it takes a little while to open. So the next step is I'm going to click the Gitpod button, okay? What that's going to do is, as I explained before, the repository that we're looking at right now is hosted in GitHub. And now we're going to open an instance of that repository in Gitpod so that we can work on the code. All right, and it really is as simple as that. So while that's loading, I just want to explain something else. Once you've opened your project with the Gitpod button, that's quite a mouthful, you only want to do that once. All right, you don't want to go back after you've worked on your code and then go back and click this again. Okay, the reason being is that if I haven't pushed files up to this repository and I click that again, it's going to open what it sees here and you may lose work. All right, so when you go back, I'll show you that in a bit, but when you go back to your workspace, you're going to be going to gitpod.io workspaces. All right. We'll run through this in a short while. Okay, and then we've got our nice clean working space, and we can see that we've got this README file. It's just been imported, so it will have a little modified over there. That means it's ready for a change. So I think the first thing we're going to do is just add a file. So we've got a little bit of content in here, and we can make a bit of sense before we start writing our Git commands. Okay, just make sure we're on track here. So I have mentioned initially you need to head over and use the template from that link. Any subsequent repository creations, you want to just click the new button, and then from the drop down you can select the template. Okay, again, we've been through naming your repo, giving it a description, something semantic, and you want to set it to public. And then those three options, as I said, once you check the CI template dropdown, those three will disappear. So you don't need to worry about those. If you notice that the IF file, the Docker file, and YML files, those are all hidden, and we've just seen that in Gitpod. Okay, just touching on these again. Once the Gitpod browser extension is installed, you'll see the Gitpod button. That's for new repositories to open in Gitpod. You only click that once. If you're coming back to your project, you go to gitpod.io workspaces. All right, and you'll notice that, as I said, our space is ready. Just a quick one on the Gitpod workspaces. There's not much to go over here. This is just a list of your previous opens. There is a note saying that unused workspaces are automatically deleted after 14 days of inactivity. So if you are going on holiday and it's going to be 15 days and you're not coding anything and you haven't pushed your work up, or what, well, you should have, but if you haven't, that will disappear after 14 days. If you want a specific one to not be affected by that, you can use the pin button over here. So you can see that's unpinned, and I'm just going to pin this one because we want to keep that. Okay. By the way, when you click that Gitpod button for the first time and this opens, it'll open with asking you to log in, and you will be logging in with your GitHub account. Okay. Right, so let's get a bit of code in, and we can start looking at some very basic commands. We're not going to get too in depth with Git because, as I said at the beginning of the call, it's a very big subject, and we don't want to get bogged down at the moment. What we want to focus on is adding your files, committing your files, and getting them into your repository. So we're going to go through that process, and we're just going to give some very simple go through some simple explanations. So in my directory tree on the left, I'm going to open a new file or create a new file, and we'll call it index.html. And you'll see I've got an empty index.html. I noticed earlier someone said, what is this little warning exclamation mark? And that is just telling you that it's warning you about something about the file. So if you don't see that, just go to View and Problems, and then it'll be pretty self-explanatory. Okay, the doc type must be declared first. Okay, it's just showing you that that's an empty index file. We are going to do that in a second. Now, what has been installed are some extensions. We'll go through extensions at the end of this. One of them is the CDN, Bootstrap CDN snippets. These are boilerplates to get you up and running. And we'll also look at prettier code formatter, and Emmet is included by default. Okay, we will go through each of those, so don't worry yet. So the code snippets, I'm just going to type a shift and exclamation mark, and you'll see some options pop up here. And these are snippets that have been added in Emmet. And we want to choose, for the sake of this one, we're going to use Bootstrap. So I'll click BCDN, which is Bootstrap CDN. All right, that's pretty self-explanatory. You can click that one, and it'll open up a nice boilerplate with all of the links for your Bootstrap. It'll open up an initial link to your CSS, which we don't have yet. We'll do that in a few minutes. And it'll also have the scripts at the bottom, and these are required for any interactive Bootstrap classes. Okay, you'll notice that these scripts are inside the body, at the bottom of the body tag, but inside the body. All right, if they go outside the body, they are not going to work. Okay. So if I look at this, what we've done is added a boilerplate, and we're quite happy with that. Let's give this a quick description. So we're just going to walk, right, Git, we're not going to walk, we're going to write, Git walkthrough. And we can pretty much put the same test project for intro to Git. I'll just shorten that a bit. Okay, and we'll go get going. Okay, that's quite cool. All right, so we've got the boilerplate. We've given it the meta name. Okay, that's obviously going to be searched in your SEO, and the content description. And we've given it a title, and the title shows up in the browser tab. And we're quite happy that that is the start of our project. So we'll open that terminal again. Right. At the moment, if I try and add anything, it's not going to add. And there's a big reason for that. If you look right at the top, there's a little white dot. Okay, and that white dot means this is not saved yet. Changes have been made, but it's not saved. Okay. If you look on the left over here, because I haven't saved this yet, it's just a new file, and it's telling me that that's unstaged. All right, get used to saving often. So you want to do Control S, and you'll notice that dot goes away. All right, and that file is now modified, but it's still unstaged. Okay, so your repo doesn't know anything about that yet, or any changes we've made for it. So if we type in here git status, we'll see that we're going to ignore the README for now. We're just going to look at the index.html. And we have made changes to the file, and it's basically ready to be added, but it's unstaged. Okay, so if we do git add index.html, okay, you'll see nothing really appears here, but you can see that's changed to added. And if we do a git status, it's got a new file, all right, and it says index.html, and it's ready to be committed. Okay, so let's do a commit for that. So we'll do git commit. Sorry, my cursor's over there. And we're going to do a nice commit message of add I'm just going to put that into the imperative. Okay, you'll notice that with the commit messages, you want to keep them in the imperative. It's not past tense, it's not added, it's add. Okay, and we've added it to a staging area, and then we're doing a commit message, so that'll actually give it an identity. And you'll see one file changed and 19 insertions. These are all of the insertions. And that's the file that's changed. Now, if we do a git push, you'll notice that adding and committing, if I refresh that, there's nothing in there. We need to push that up to our repository. Okay, so very first time you do this, you will get this message, and you'll see that it kicks up a 403 error. If you type that in Slack, there is an automatic response from Slackbot that'll give you what I'm going to show you now. But what you need to do is very simple, is go up to the top right and you'll find your logo of your account, and then click Account, and then click Access Control, and make sure that these 4 boxes, the top 4, are checked, and click Update. Okay, you can close that. Close that. So if I use the up arrow key, this is quite handy, by the way. It's just once you're working on one terminal, if you click the up arrow key, it'll cycle through your last few commits or git commands. So I'm just going to choose git push, and you can see that's now pushing the file that we've created and added something to. It's pushed up to our repository. So if I refresh this just with an F5, you'll see our index.html there is add boilerplate and customize for project. If we open that, we can see our details that we've put in there. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. So let's just do another another quick example. We don't want to spend too much on this because it is quite straightforward. Let's go to Bootstrap, since we've already got the CDN in there. And if we click Documentation and Navbar, let's pop in a nice little navbar here. I want one with the logo, navbar logo, and we'll use it without the listed items. So you can use this without list items. So we can pop that in, make sure it's in your body, give a nice space there. And I would actually put in a comment here. With comments, use 2 dashes, by the way. So 2 on either side, and we can just put navigation. Okay. Now, if you notice that the code looks a bit squashed, and with the prettier extension, if you hold down Alt, Shift, and F, or you right-click anywhere in your document and go down to Format Document, Alt, Shift, and F, that will indent your code nicely. Okay. Don't worry about these little colored things. I'm going to get to that. That's just something else that I've installed. Okay. So I find that looks pretty good. I like the indentation. I can click there and I can see where my nav element's ending, and you can see the div open and close. Try and keep your code really neat too. So let's do Gitify. Okay, I just made that up, but anyway. And we can go about Git, and we can go contact Mr. Git. Okay. And we don't need this disabled link. We can take that out. Okay. What I haven't done yet is I haven't saved. You can see the white dot. Control S for save. You can also go file save, but that's going to drive you insane if you're doing that 100 times a day. You can set this to auto save. I tend to get in, rather keep in the habit of manually saving, but you can set Gitpod to auto save your files as you make changes. All right, so and I think for the sake of this example, we will add a folder. Let's just set up our, And we'll add another folder inside that called CSS. And inside CSS, we'll add a file called style.css. Notice the relative path for the link over here. Assets, CSS, and style.css. If that had a capital A, that's not going to work and it's not going to see that. Okay, it's got to be spelled exactly the same and use the relative path. We are in the root directory, so we go straight to assets and then down. If I was in there and I needed to get an image in an image file that was somewhere, I can show you later on. You want to use .. / because that'll step up and then back down into the files. Okay, so relative file paths are really important, and that's via Git as well. Okay, so we've got this. Let's just do some quick change on here, just so we've got a little bit of content. I don't really need to add any styling as such because we're using Bootstrap for this example. And let's do a margin of 0 and box sizing border box. Okay, and remember both of these are unsaved, so I want to save there, make sure that's saved. Okay, and if we want to have a quick look at our navbar, you know that to open the server, it's a bad spelling day. And mine is http.server. That'll open port 8000. And we'll open browser. Okay. If this doesn't open immediately and you get port, I think it might actually do that now. All you need to do is it's just propagating that information in there. So if you see port 8000 didn't respond, you can try again, or just do a Control Shift and R, which is a cache clear, and that will open up. So we've got our contact, Mr. Git, we've got our about Git, and our home, and we've got a little navbar. Okay, and as you know with Bootstrap, if you are familiar with it, or if you're not, these classes are Bootstrap classes. You'll see lots of them given to you by the Bootstrap link. So these classes like that are basically fetching the CSS from this link. So that's all that link is over there. It's a Bootstrap CSS link. Okay, it's all compiled. That will jump over there and go and fetch the CSS that's related to that class name. If we give it our own class name, it's going to go, and if it's not there, it's going to go and search for it in our style.css. Okay, so let's, for the sake of this, change these. I know that these are, that one we can do dark. We'll do dark like that. And save. We can go back here, Control Shift and R, and you'll see that that changes. Okay, so we've got a navbar up, and I think let's hypothetically say that I've sorted this all out and I've got my navbar the way I want it. I've got a nice image in there, and I'm happy with the fact that it's working responsively. And I can see the great thing with Bootstrap is you do have everything out of the box. Okay, and I'm happy to commit that. Okay, now the server is busy running, so you'll notice that it ends over there and I can't type. All right, you can press Control C to stop the server running. You would just need to open it up from here again. Otherwise, you can open a new terminal by clicking Terminal, New Terminal, and that'll open side by side. All right, so we've got our changes. We've changed all of that. We can see that this file is unstaged. It's a brand new file, so your repository doesn't know about the file or these folders yet. It does know about index.html, but it doesn't know about the changes we've done. So I'm going to just get this index up here by git add index.html. Okay, so you can see by git status, it's modified and staged. So we can go git commit, add bootstrap navigation bar and customize. All right, and I've customized it in the HTML with my own links and so forth. All right, I'm going to press enter, and I'm not going to push that up yet because I want to show you how we can add more commits to this. Okay, so that one's fine, and you'll see that all the messages disappear next to it unless I make more changes and save. Now we've got the styles.css. We've made a change on it, so it is modified, but the repository doesn't know anything about it yet. So we're going to do that. For the sake of the README, we'll leave that for the moment because that is just the template README. Okay. So I'm going to do git add style.css, and you'll notice it says it does not match any files. Okay, if we do git status, this is a brand new file, directory, sorry, so it doesn't quite know what's going on yet. So we need to just follow that path down. So we can go git add assets, CSS, style.css. That's a relative path. Okay, if we do a git status now, you'll see that the new file and the new folders, assets, CSS, style.css, is now ready. Okay, so we can go git commit, and those are now added. We'll go -m, and we'll say create style.css and file structure. I spelled that right. Spelling's very important, by the way, with your Git messages. Don't write, a bunch of jargon. Start with a capital letter. Keep it semantic. You want your Git messages to mean something to someone looking at your Git history and knowing what you've actually done at any particular point. And this is very important. Okay, we're going to commit that as well. And then lastly, the README, let's just take out that, and we'll actually take out all of that info. We're going to leave that nice Code Institute image there for the moment. All right. The other way you can do that is with a square bracket image, and we can pop in that link. Okay. For the moment, I'm not going to go into Markdown. It's a bit out of the scope of this, so I'll just do an H1 heading and Git tutorial. Okay. Okay, and we'll save that, just so that we've got our own custom save on that. And because that is in the root directory, we can go git add readme.md, git commit, and we'll just go replace readme content and clear. Okay, that was actually very, very bad English. I could just say clear. We'll just do clear README content. Should do a capital there, but anyway. Having a real field day with spelling today, Jim. Okay, there we go. So probably Git would be better than got. Okay, so at the moment we've got quite a few committed files. We go git status, you can see that there's nothing to commit. If we go git log, we can see all of the commits that we've made, and our current working space for the master branch, which is what we're on, is ahead of the repository. So if we look, you can see the branch that we're working on here is ahead of the origin master, that's the origin on GitHub, by 3 commits. Okay, so if we're happy with that, we want to do one last thing, and I want to show you the git add all. So let's go back to Bootstrap and let's add a Jumbotron. Okay, and we'll just, what I'm going to do is add a container. You can see the emmet working here again. I've just typed .container, and if I press tab, it'll create a div with a class container, and I'll pop a Jumbotron in there. Okay, and then Alt, Shift, and F, or right-click and format document, and it'll indent your code nicely. Save. Okay, I'm going to add new info on my README. Okay, just so that we've got a change there. And the style, let's just go body. We'll give it a font size for the sake of actually just writing in something here of 1.2 gram. Okay. So we've saved those 3 files. We've suddenly got a whole bunch. But if we are working on the same thing, this is not the best example because this README, obviously this has got nothing to do with the fact that I've added the font size on there. But let's just hypothetically say that I've worked on the Jumbotron and I've styled it, and I think the README doesn't really come into it at the moment, but we want to add all of these files together. We could do git add space dot. Okay, it will add all of those to the staging area. So if we go git status, you'll notice that already those would, for that commit message that we're going to write, let's just pretend that all of these have relation to the same message that we're going to put in. Okay, so hypothetically we've created a Jumbotron and we've styled it, and let's just ignore this commit message for this README for the moment. It's just to explain or give an example how the git add all works. All right, git commit, and we'll go nonsense commit. Don't ever do this in your project, please. Okay, nonsense commit, because it's just a kind of jumbled commit. All right, and finally, we've got a whole bunch of commits ready. So we have 4 commits ahead. You'll notice that none of those appear at the moment. But what we'll do is then we'll just do a git push, and we will push them all up together. All right, so that's pushing all of the commits that's added up to that particular point. Once you press git push, that's when they will go up to your repository. They won't be there before. And if you go and look there and say, I made all these changes, but they're not showing up, that is why you need to make sure you add, commit, and push. You can add and commit, add and commit, add and commit all day, but nothing will be in your repository until you push all of the commits since the last push commits. And that's it. Okay. Right, quickly, I know this is going on. I said I'd try and keep it short, but it is going on a bit. So we'll push through. So pushing, I tend to, there's no harm in pushing as often as you like. Just remember that all of your commits and your changes will be safe on GitHub once you push them there. They are not safely there before we're pushing them there. So as a rule, if you want to push after every commit, by all means, go for it. Some people push at the end of the day, some people push if they get up for a cup of coffee and they've done a bunch of work. you can't really push too often. Okay, so just briefly through this, add all, git add dot, try and make sure that if you're adding all, they're all grouped with the same sort of functionality. I know my example was a little bit abstract there, but I'm sure you get the point. Add individual files, git add, and the file name. And if they're multiple files in multiple directories, you do want to use the relative path if they are not in the root directory. Okay, you want to keep the commit messages in the imperative, so add, not added or going to add. Just add bootstrap navigation bar and customized links, or I should have said customize. Update logo image with compressed version. You know, go and look into commit messages and you know, examples of good commit messages and commit message practice. It's very important as you go along that you're not, you know, you're not writing things in a way that people aren't going to understand. And remember, your projects are being assessed. Okay, you commit regularly, but you want to commit when a particular instance or a material change has been completed. So don't just color something red and go and commit it. Work on that entire thing that you are working on. Once it's done, then commit. Okay. Right, we've been through that error 403. Just to explain that again, you can come back to the slideshow. It's very straightforward. Okay, again, commit often, don't commit half-done work. You only want to commit code when a logical component is added or completed. Right, you want to add semantic get messages. Don't just say fixed a bug. It doesn't mean anything to anyone. You want to say fix bug that was ABC. Okay. And you want to keep smaller updates around 50 characters or less, but more detailed explanations you can bump up to, as a guideline, about 72. Okay. There's also a lot more that Git entails. So if you want to look at branching, it's something that I'd recommend looking into to include on your milestone project. Basically, you can create a branch. You can see over here, we're in the master branch. You can work on this, create a branch from where we are, and it'll split off. You can work on a new feature, and later on, if you want that new feature, and if it works and you're happy with it, you can merge that feature back into the master branch. And that is effectively using version control. It's recommended that you look into that. Okay. I have got a link that briefly explains, but there are lots of videos online that you can look at. All right, and then deployment, I actually want to get this going quite quickly because there's always a bit of a delay with deployment. Okay, I have listed this out in steps on the slideshow, but in your repository, you can see, if I F5 that, you see all of our new changes with nonsense comments. We're in our repository, click settings, scroll down to GitHub pages, and under source, you want to click the drop down and select master. So we want the master branch to be deployed, and then click save, and that's it. This will jump to the top again, and all you do is scroll down again, and it says your site is ready to be published at this address. Now, if I click, I'm going to hold down Control and click to open this in a new browser tab. It's more than often, if you do that immediately, you are going to get this page straight away. These do take quite a while to propagate. So this information from your code is busy being propagated. If I do a refresh of that as well, you'll see that it says your site is published at that address. Okay, so it is published there, but we're just going to have to wait. And hopefully by the end of this call, that's actually up. But if not, just be patient with this, like the Gitpod opening and everything else with coding, be patient. This does take some time. Okay, so we'll leave that for a few seconds. We'll just have a look at the extensions I mentioned. So there are two, for the sake of it, two extra extension. I've got bracket pair colorizer. If you look over there, you've got a nice coloring of brackets. And I've got my indent rainbow, which is another extension that I installed. It's great because if you're working on your code, you will see that you've got a nice color for each column. So if you've got multiple rows, let's indent this out. You can actually see that it'll just keep adding colors. Now, if we go to Emmet, and let's just take this shortcut over here. So that's a UL unordered list with 3 list items. So I don't want to divert too much, but just to show you how this works. Okay, let's do 20. Okay, so it's 20 list elements in a UL, and we got the Emmet coming up. We can click that, and it'll create 20 list items. Okay, let's say we've got some divs in here, and they're indented, and we've got some more divs, and they're indented there. The whole point is when your code gets longer, you can follow this down quite easily, even if this is on the next page. When I say next page, as in I'm scrolled down to there and I can't see the end of it yet. But if you, let's just make that a bit more visible. So I wanted to follow that down, and I got lost because there was a lot of code like above here, but I can follow the green one down and I can see where that closing tag is. Okay. If you want to install a new one, don't go too mad on this, but you can search for anything here. If I wanted to install, let's say, code spell checker, I'd click install. It will ask, do you want to install for this project only, or do you want to install it for, there's my account name, that will basically install it for all of my projects that in the future that I bring into Gitpod. So I would usually check that to make sure that they're always there. Okay, but as I said, don't get too carried away with extensions. Okay, the deployment, this is just a brief explanation of those steps that I took to deploy the site. We'll go and have a look at that in a second and see if it's live yet. Then this is just a basic flow. Just to recap everything, we've got our new repository that we've created with the Gitpod full template on GitHub. We've then clicked the green Gitpod button and we've opened it in Gitpod. Then we work on our files, we save them, and then we want to add the files with git add. Okay, those changes we've made, and they'll go into a staging area. And then you need to do a git commit with a nice semantic commit message, and they will go back into the staged area, but they'll be committed files in the staged area. Okay, and then they are not on GitHub yet, as you can see from this. You need to do that last final git push into your repository on GitHub. That'll update it, and then you can do the deployment to GitHub pages, which we've been through. Now, just note that every time you make new changes in here, you don't have to go and submit or go to the settings or do anything. Your live site will be updated automatically. Okay. Some things to keep in mind is start somewhere, get in there, get your nav bar up, style it, make sure it's responsive, add, commit, push. Do the next thing, add, commit, push. Or you can bulk up a couple of commits if you at your machine. Generally, if I'm walking away from the computer, I make sure I've pushed up. Okay. Like we've just done in this presentation, get a test repo together and play. Don't be scared of playing around and practicing some Git. It really will get you far later on in the course, especially. All right. For now, remember those three. You can also revert commits to a previous commit, and you can create branches, work on that branch, and then merge to master. Okay. Use Google, Stack Overflow, Slack history. And also the error messages in the console, in the terminal. you can copy that and throw it into Google search to search, and the answers have pretty much been answered, or the questions have been answered. Okay, so it's very good practice to get used to searching. And then finally, I've just got some additional resources. I've put together a while back. I need to add one more step. That's just that initial step of use this template from the Gitpod, but the browser extensions are available on here. And that's just a little walk through each of the steps that we've gone through in this video. So I'm not going to go through each of those now. Also, Anna has just posted up a great video on the Gitpod button and importance of pushing your code. We've also got a Git cheat sheet, and the link is there. You can download this. This is just about how to check out different branches, working with remote repository, undoing changes, and the basics. And then specifically, you saw just now, I had a little peek into this. This is the Emmett cheat sheet, and that's like your autocomplete for coding. This cheat sheet's great. It's quite a short one. There are lots out there, and it's there's a lot that you can do with you know, working faster and smarter with code. Okay. And then finally, we've gone through the extensions. I've shown you a little bit about relative paths. It's a question that comes up for a lot of people. You know, my images aren't showing, so I have popped up a link there. It's likely I'll do a call on that at some point as well. And then importantly, there are two very important Slack channels for Git and GitPod. But it's very, very important, please, to just notice the difference between the two. The I don't Git it is only for things related to Git version control, all right? Not GitPod or GitHub or anything else. Okay, GitPod is only things related to GitPod itself. All right. And that is it. What I'm going to do is go back to our live site. I'm not going to hold my breath, but I'm going to do a Control Shift and R, and we don't have anything yet. All right. So that is something I would just close down and go and make a cup of coffee. It's quite good that you're seeing this now, because when you do your deployment and you expecting your site to, you know, magically appear there in seconds, it sometimes does take quite a while. All right. So don't stress out about that. Just go and have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and come back to it at a later stage. You can see that we've left this for a good few minutes and it's still not up yet. All right, but it will be up there at some point. Okay, I think that's it. And thanks everyone for joining. I hope this was useful and helpful for you. Please don't copy all of my spelling errors. And I look forward to seeing you in the next call. Take care.